police officer was walking through the park after a bad day. The barking of his dog made him angry. An idea flashed in his mind. He took out a can of pepper spray from his pocket and sprayed it straight into the dog's face to see how it would react. But when the officer found out who the dog's owner was, he felt like his heart stopped. Lucas had been pacing this route for nearly 30 minutes, trying to distract himself from the dark mood plaguing him. Thoughts raced through his mind: budget cuts at the department, disagreements with his colleagues, and frustration over his own personal life. He needed an outlet. Something, anything, to break the monotony of his day. As the gloom of the afternoon pressed down, Lucas found himself drawn to an old oak tree near a small park, perhaps hoping to find a fleeting sense of peace in the town's park atmosphere. That was when he spotted a German shepherd sitting calmly under the oak tree, occasionally sniffing at the air. Its posture was regal, head held high, ears erect, as though it was on alert, but also at peace. Lucas paused, curiosity piqued. The dog appeared well-groomed, not like a stray. Yet there was no visible owner nearby. He reached for the pepper spray canister on his belt. It was an impulsive, unprofessional thought that crossed his mind. What if I test how it reacts? He justified this action to himself as a so-called legitimate defense. Yet deep inside, he knew it was more about his own pent-up aggression and frustration. Lucas approached slowly, his boots crunching gravel beneath his feet. The dog regarded him with a quizzical tilt of the head. From years of training, Lucas was aware that dogs often sensed tension, but in his current mindset, he chose to ignore that inner caution. He raised the canister, aimed, and pressed down. The hiss of pepper spray cut through the still air. The German shepherd yelped and scrambled backward, shaking its head in confusion and pain. Lucas expected it to flee, but surprisingly, it didn't run away. Instead, the dog crouched, clearly disoriented, but still unwilling to desert its spot. Lucas felt an odd mix of satisfaction and discomfort. A small voice in the back of his head told him this was wrong, yet he forced himself to remain stoic. That was when Lucas heard a soft whirring sound approaching from behind, a motorized wheelchair. Turning, he saw Richard Logan, a tall man slumped slightly in a powered wheelchair, wearing dark sunglasses and carefully maneuvering the controls. Logan had been the former sheriff of Maplewood before an on-duty incident left him blinded. Despite his disability, he carried an air of authority and calmness wherever he went. As Logan drew closer, Lucas noticed the man's face contort with alarm. Even though he couldn't see what was happening, Logan seemed to sense that something was amiss with his dog. "Marley," Logan called. "Marley, come here." A wave of realization crashed over Lucas as the German shepherd struggled its way over to Logan's side, panting hard. This was no stray. Marley was Logan's service dog, a K9 partner that had been assigned to him after Logan's injury. Lucas felt his stomach drop. Memories from the department came flooding back. Marley was well known among the officers. He had been a top K9 dog with multiple citations for bravery. Many stories circulated about how Marley saved Logan's life while still on active duty. The significance of the dog was immense, and Lucas had just pepper sprayed him. Logan, wrestling with anger yet controlling his tone, addressed Lucas. "I heard Marley yelping. Tell me exactly what happened." Lucas struggled for words. He glanced around, hoping no one had noticed, but a few bystanders, some walking their own dogs, others just strolling, were beginning to converge, forming a small cluster of onlookers. The murmurs began. A middle-aged woman whispered to her friend, "Isn't that Officer Lucas? What on earth is he doing?" A younger man took out his phone, possibly recording or snapping photos. The tight-knit community of Maplewood had little tolerance for cruelty, especially cruelty directed at a service animal belonging to a respected figure like Richard Logan. Logan's voice had that old, authoritative ring, Marley is more than a pet, Lucas. He's my partner, my lifeline. He saves me from walking into danger every day. How could you do this? Another passerby chimed in. I've seen Lucas pull stunts like this before, pulling over skateboarders for no reason, shining his flashlight into random cars. He's known to act first and think later. Logan's indignation grew palpable, though his tone remained eerily calm. You wear that badge. Aren't you supposed to protect and serve? Is this your interpretation of that oath? Lucas stammered. I was just making sure the dog wasn't dangerous. There have been reports of stray dogs attacking people. I didn't realize. But his defense sounded flimsy, even to him. Logan, fists clenched on the armrest of his wheelchair, delivered a measured warning. You need to be held accountable for this. Officer Lucas, attacking a service dog without provocation. You've crossed a line. Within minutes, the scene had been captured on multiple cell phones. By the time Lucas left the park, social media had already begun to churn with images, short clips, and outraged commentary. Officer abuses a disabled man's dog. Has Maplewood PD gone too far? The post ricocheted around local online forums and even some broader networks. Lucas's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Early the next morning, the Maplewood Police Department summoned Lucas. An email from Captain Nathan had arrived in Lucas's inbox at dawn, demanding his immediate presence. Anxiety gnawed at Lucas as he drove to the station, the sky still overcast, as though nature itself was judging him. Inside Captain Nathan's office, Lucas stood at attention, trying not to fidget. Nathan, a stoic but fair leader, fixed Lucas with a steely glare. I've received a flood of complaints, Nathan said, voice low and controlled. We also have video evidence from multiple angles, not to mention the statements of Richard Logan. Do you have any idea what you've done to the department's reputation, to that dog, and to the community's trust? Lucas's throat felt dry. He mustered. Sir, it was a lapse in judgment. Nathan nodded grimly. I'll say, effective immediately, you are suspended pending an internal review. Hand over your badge and your firearm. With trembling fingers, Lucas removed the badge from his uniform, the one he had pinned over his heart since graduating from the academy. He placed his service weapon beside it on Nathan's desk. In that moment, the reality of his actions became painfully clear. He was no longer an officer of the law. A crushing sense of shame enveloped him. By lunchtime, the whole town seemed aware of his suspension. Every glance he received felt like an accusation. As he walked home, a few children whispered to each other, pointing him out as if he were a criminal. The once familiar streets now felt hostile and alien. He dreaded meeting neighbors or friends, afraid that they would scorn him for his reckless, indefensible act. Desperate for counsel, Lucas sought out Rachel, a fellow officer he trusted. She was a level-headed presence in a department that had grown weary of Lucas's impulsive behavior. Sitting across from each other in her living room, Lucas tried to explain. I'm not even sure why I did it, he muttered. I was angry, or I just wanted some sense of control. Rachel sighed, stirring sugar into her tea. Larry, the only way out of this is to own it. That dog is a hero in this town, and Logan, he's the man who trained half of us. You messed up, big time. Lucas nodded, a lump forming in his throat. I don't know if an apology will help, but... Rachel fixed him with a sympathetic yet firm gaze. You have to try, Larry. Apologize to Logan personally, then apologize to the town. You can't hide from this. Taking her advice to heart, Lucas found himself outside Logan's modest suburban home the next day. The small, single-story house had a ramp leading to the front door, evidence of Logan's need for wheelchair access. Marley's barking signaled Lucas's arrival before he even knocked. When Logan opened the door, or rather maneuvered his wheelchair to it, Lucas realized that Marley was still affected by the pepper spray. The dog's eyes were slightly red and watery. Remorse churned in Lucas's gut. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Logan," he began, voice wavering. "I'm here to apologize. I know what I did was inexcusable." Logan's face was unreadable behind his dark glasses. He did not invite Lucas inside, nor did he speak for a long moment. Finally, he said, "You've done a lot of damage, Officer Lucas. I accept that you're remorseful, but an apology to me alone isn't enough." Lucas nodded, casting his eyes downward. "I understand." Logan folded his hands on his lap. "We have a town meeting scheduled next week. If you're serious about making amends, you'll come and face everyone you've hurt." Though Lucas swallowed nervously, he agreed. He felt he had little choice but to own up to his mistake. The following week, the Maplewood Town Hall filled with townspeople. Captain Nathan, wearing a grave expression, stepped up to a small podium at the front of the wide community room. "Thank you all for attending," Nathan began. "We have a matter that deeply concerns our police department, our community, and especially Richard Logan and his service dog, Marley." Nathan invited Lucas to step forward. The eyes of the crowd bore into him, some curious, some hostile, a few sympathetic. Lucas felt sweat dampen the back of his neck. He coughed to clear his throat, then began, voice shaky. "I'm here to take responsibility for my actions. I pepper-sprayed Marley without any just cause. It was cruel, reckless, and a betrayal of the trust you've placed in me as an officer of the law. I offer no excuses." He paused, scanning the faces in the audience. An elderly couple looked at him in disappointment. A group of teenagers stared with condemnation. The local veterinarian, arms folded, wore a grimace. And near the front, Richard Logan waited, his posture stiff. "I know my apologies cannot undo the harm I caused," Lucas continued. "But I am prepared to do whatever it takes to make amends. If not to earn forgiveness, then at least to show you all that I understand the gravity of what I've done." A ripple of whispered conversations swept through the audience. Then a man wearing a Maplewood High baseball cap stood up. "Well, it's about time you owned up, Lucas. Your stunts have gone too far for too long, but I guess we should hear you out." A few others muttered in agreement. A woman who volunteered at the local shelter spoke up. "He hurt a defenseless animal. That's one of the worst things an officer can do. But if he truly wants to help, our town could use more volunteers." This sentiment slowly gained traction, with some nodding and a few offering cautious acceptance. Not long after the meeting, Lucas approached the Maplewood Animal Rescue Center. Known to be underfunded and overpopulated with abandoned or stray animals, the shelter staff was constantly scrambling for resources. Lucas offered to volunteer his time and labor, cleaning cages, feeding animals, walking dogs, and assisting with maintenance tasks like repairing fences and scrubbing floors. It was menial, humbling work. Every morning, Lucas arrived at the crack of dawn, rolling up his sleeves to shovel waste, disinfect kennels, and see to the animals' needs. The first few days, staff members eyed him warily. Lucas recognized one of the volunteers from the town meeting. She had looked at him with contempt then, but after watching his consistent efforts, her stare softened into something resembling respect. He would spend hours walking restless dogs, giving them the attention they craved. Each bark and wagging tail seemed to echo a lesson in compassion. As days turned into weeks, Lucas came to view the animals not as potential threats, but as lives deserving care, protection, and empathy. The work was exhausting, but also strangely healing. Sometimes, while picking up supplies, Lucas would run into people in town. A few of them had heard about his volunteer work, and while not everyone was ready to let him off the hook, at least the scowls were fewer. He understood he had to keep proving himself. One particularly grueling afternoon, Lucas managed to load a full delivery of pet food sacks into the shelter's back room. Sweating and panting, he turned around to find Richard Logan waiting at the door. Marley sat by his side, harness on, calmly peering in Lucas's direction with those intelligent brown eyes. Lucas wiped sweat from his brow. "Mr. Logan," he said, straightening up. I didn't expect to see you here." Logan offered a thin smile. "I heard you were spending your free time at the rescue center. I wanted to see if it was true or just another story." Lucas looked down at Marley. The dog studied him in the way only dogs can, as if measuring his intent. Lucas knelt and held out a hand. Marley's ears flicked. After a moment of careful consideration, the German Shepherd sniffed Lucas's hand, then gave it a small, tentative lick. Lucas felt his eyes burn with emotion. This was the closest thing to forgiveness he'd ever received from the dog he had wronged so severely. Standing, he met Logan's gaze. Though Logan couldn't see him, Lucas felt it was important to speak earnestly. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Logan. I know it can never undo what I did, but I promise I'll keep working to do better. This place," he gestured at the rows of kennels and the barking dogs, "has taught me a lot already. About empathy, about responsibility." Logan nodded. "It appears you're learning, and I appreciate that. Marley seems to think you're on a better path now." He stroked the dog's head gently. "As for your future in law enforcement, that's not up to me alone, but I have spoken to Captain Nathan, and he's considering reinstating you if you continue to show genuine remorse and commitment. Not just to the dogs, but to the people of this town." A wave of relief mixed with determination washed over Lucas. "Thank you," he said softly. Logan placed a hand on Marley's back, pivoting to leave. "I do expect you to keep this up, Lucas. Redemption is earned, not given." Lucas nodded firmly, watching as the motorized wheelchair glided out of the shelter. For a moment, he leaned against the kennel wall, trying to process the conversation. The noise of barking dogs surrounded him, but he felt a sense of calm in the chaos. Over the next few weeks, Lucas doubled his efforts at the shelter. He helped organize adoption drives, used his connections at the police department to gather resources, and pitched in for weekend events aimed at educating the community about responsible pet ownership. The staff began to see him as a valuable asset, not just a disgraced officer. Meanwhile, online chatter about the incident slowly shifted. Where once there had been viral outrage and calls to have Lucas permanently removed from the force, new posts started appearing. Officer Lucas volunteering at the animal shelter. Some folks argued that what he did was unforgivable, but others believed in the possibility of rehabilitation and saw Lucas's efforts as a step in the right direction. Finally, the day of the meeting with Captain Nathan arrived. The sky still bore a coat of gray clouds, reminiscent of the day Lucas had pepper-sprayed Marley, but this time Lucas's mindset was different. He felt a guarded optimism. Walking into the station, he passed colleagues who greeted him with polite nods rather than outright scowls. In Nathan's office, Logan sat quietly beside the captain. Marley rested on the floor. Lucas's heart thudded. Nathan gestured for Lucas to sit. "Lucas," Nathan began, steepling his fingers. "We've completed our internal review. Given the severity of the incident, we can fire you. However, Logan has advocated for a second chance, provided we place you under a probationary period. You will continue mandatory counseling and community service until we're certain you understand the responsibilities of wearing the badge." Logan added, "You've shown genuine remorse and an effort to change. Marley seems to believe in you, and so do I, cautiously." Lucas exhaled a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Relief flooded him, but also a renewed sense of duty. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Either of you." He shook hands with Nathan. Though Logan couldn't see it, Lucas turned and offered a respectful nod in his direction. Marley wagged his tail, as if approving the scene. If it were you, would you give the police officer a chance to make amends? Share your thoughts in the comments section.